Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week on the Coast Sports Network's Sports Radio 1029 The Game. So glad everybody can be with us this week. So much to talk about. As usual, I have my tag team partner, Kevin Midgette, here with me. Going to probably go a lot heavy on the Eagles because you're Philly, Kevin. You got to talk about your Eagles. And I covered the team for many years, still live in the area. And let's just jump right into it, Kevin. How you doing this evening?
Doing well. Happy holidays to everyone.
Yeah, happy holidays. Hopefully everybody did their shopping. My wife sent me out on some errands today, and let me tell you, it's getting crazy out there. People fighting for parking spaces and long lines at the register and all that holiday cheer in the air, So hopefully everybody stays safe, enjoys their holiday season, enjoys their family. And the National Football League, it's getting hot and heavy. Kevin, we thought we knew a lot, but we sure don't, but I do got to give you your props. We talked last week and you said the Eagles were due for a fall, and sure enough, it came to fruition. It was a crazy game. I enjoyed watching it. Washington, they're now 10-5. They beat the Eagles, who fall to 12-3. It was 36-33. It's not Washington, but it was in Maryland. But what a game to watch. And it's the number one game everybody's talking about around the National Football League.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm not going to pat myself on the back too hard. Once you pick a team to lose three out of the last 4 weeks, they're bound to lose at some point. So I'll take a little credit with that. That being said, I it's not the worst thing in the world that can happen to them. I mean, they definitely put themselves in a predicament at this point because that number one seed is basically bye bye and gone. So you're going to have to go on the road at some point if you want to get to the Super Bowl if you're the Eagles. You have to make sure guys are healthy as well. You don't want to go in the playoffs banged up. Now you missed any chance of that bye week also. So there's definitely some fallout from this loss.
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack, and we'll get to the stats in a minute. But I think one of the biggest things, and I wanted to get your take on it, Kevin, is Jalen Hurts. His value to the team was kind of showed, and we had talked all along about Kenny Pickett, two gloves. Was he the guy that could step up and help this team win? He's definitely not a Nick Foles type. I'll put it that way. Jalen Hurts gets hurt on a 13-yard run where he's hit. I want to see what you think on that hit. And he gets concussed. He tried to come back in the game, but they would not let him in. And Kenny Pickett kind of took over from there. So talk about Pickett's performance and then touch on Hurts and his value to the Eagles.
I think Pickett proves that the dearth of talent that's in the NFL for backups right now, there's very few teams that have a guy who can step in right away and play. And that's one of the things we brought up a month or so ago about Daniel Jones when he was out there. Is that someone maybe the Eagles should have looked at perhaps to bring him in to be a backup? I mean, Minnesota, snapped him up pretty quick. That being said, once again, Kenny Pickett did what you want your backup to do. He put you in a position to win the game. They had a chance to win the game. I don't think the onus of that game falls on him entirely. I think the defense has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, and Kenny Pickett, 14 of 24, 143, had one TD, one interception, and he did his job. He's a backup quarterback for a reason. I was listening to some nonsense. Somebody I talked to, I think he just tries to bait me, and he was trying to say Pickett should have been the starter all along. I mean, that was way back in September or so, and it's just showing you that Pickett. There's a dearth between Hurts and then Pickett. That drop off that you were talking about, and Pickett, he's good enough to be a backup. And the Steelers got rid of him for a reason. The crazy thing is, in his draft class, everybody knows he was the only first rounder taken in 2020. And probably the best quarterback taken was the last quarterback, the last pick in the draft, Brock Purdy of that group. So you talked about the defense, and that's where I really wanted to focus in this one, Kevin. Um, they just could not get Washington off the field in key moments, particularly that end of the game drive where it was that 9 play, 57-yard drive that ended with, we know, Crowder's touchdown with only 6 seconds on the clock. And this defense, everybody said, oh, they're number one across the board, Lloyd. And they were trying to compare them to Reggie White's defense that was number one way back in the day. And early on, I said, yeah, I think it was who they were kind of playing, and they had some very good matchups, particularly the quarterbacks and the teams they were playing. And then they played pretty well against the Ravens and Steelers. And I don't know if it was those teams kind of playing down or what it was, but the Eagles defense, as you said, was kind of struggling, and they allowed Washington to have 368 total yards, and they scored 36 points. And the biggest one I want to get your take on is they allowed 22 points in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they couldn't stop Jaden Daniels at a certain point. I mean, Jaden Daniels threw 5 touchdowns on him. I mean, once again, it's like the third week in a row now. A guy you wouldn't have guessed to throw 4 more touchdowns has done so. They couldn't get to stop when they needed it. They should have had the game locked up after the interception in the fourth
Yeah.
quarter. And once again, Devontae Smith can't make a catch that he normally would make. And that put that defense back on the field again with a chance to give up the game, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, and a big thing is, as you were kind of alluding to, the Eagles, they own time possession in this game. They 36-18 to only 23-42 for Washington. But Washington, at key moments in the game, particularly in the fourth quarter, they were driving the football, and the Eagles defense just did not have any answer. And a big thing was on third downs. Washington was 7 of 13 for 66%. When they needed it, they were getting it. And then the Eagles just were not getting the pressure or getting the stops. The Eagles only had one sack in the game. And I wanted to ask you, is this something that Eagles fans, should worry about? Can they clean this up? Or we've always talked about that swoon from last season. I mean, is that in the air?
This week as well is like some team has a matchup with somebody, a blueprint on how to attack them. And did Washington do that for other teams to replicate? We won't know that because the Eagles finished with Dallas and the Giants. But you get a better defensive coordinator in the playoffs, they maybe saw something in a way to attack this defense that they don't have an answer for.
Yeah, and then Dan Quinn's done a great job in terms of rebuilding Washington's defense, and that group. They've lost some guys like Allen throughout the season, but they kind of pick it up. Um, Lattimore did have a tough game. He had 3 PIs in this game, but overall, yes, Washington had a very good game plan. You see that they kind of learned from the first time that they played them. And you can't talk about this game without talking about Jaden Daniels, as you were talking about earlier. I think he wrapped up the offensive rookie of the year award, 24-39, 258 passing, 5 TDs. He did have 2 interceptions, but he was also running the ball dynamically. 9 rushes for 81 yards, and he was moving the chains. And it was funny because in space, the Eagles guys just were having problems getting him on the ground. I think last time they played, that rib injury kind of affected him, but he was bringing the wood. And is Jane Daniels going to be? Is he going to be that problem? Going forward for the Eagles. He could be a guy. He's in their division. They're going to see him over and over again for a number of years.
It looks right now that Jaden Daniels will be a problem for the next decade against the Eagles. But also, we thought RG3 was going to be a problem for the decade as well. And then, in my opinion, not everyone's, Shanahan did him a disservice by leaving him on the field in that playoff game.
Yeah.
So if Jaden Daniels has a more, I don't want to say competent, but more a coach that's aware of the moment and the future, he's going to be a problem for a decade.
Yeah, and he definitely going to be around, and he's a dynamic player. And offensively, they don't have a lot of help for him. Um, Wanted to get your take on Washington had 5 turnovers in this game, but the Eagles only got 6 points off of those 5 turnovers. Particularly, Brian Robinson had 2 fumbles that were huge in this game. But typically all season, Fangio and his defense had the answer in terms of, okay, they get the turnover and then the offense capitalizes. Was it a case where no Hurts was the problem, or what were you seeing in there in terms of the turnovers that were just not getting converted?
They just weren't converting them. That's what it was. You have that many turnovers. Your defense did their job in that respect. They got you the ball back. Do something with it. You let a team hang around long enough, especially after turning the ball over that many times, you're going to give them a chance to win the game. And Washington took advantage of that on that defense at the end.
Yeah, and that's a great comment in terms of, yeah, they took advantage of it, and the Eagles just did not capitalize on it. And you got to, once you get those turnovers, you got to just stick the knife in and kill all desperation in that other team. And they just didn't. They let them hang around, and then they jumped on them. Last week, you and I touched on this, and in the Steelers game against the Eagles, there were a lot of fights, and the Eagles kind of got away with
Mhm.
personal foul things in that game. Well, this week the chickens came home to roost, particularly a guy I've been all over in terms of his attitude, and he needs to clean it up. CJ Gardner Johnson gets two personal foul penalties, and he's ejected from the game, and that was huge because McCollum that came in for him. He kind of struggled, and he was missing tackles. There was a couple big tackles he missed in space. Talk a little bit about that edge that we talked about last week that C.J. Gardner Johnson and Jalen Carter have to watch in terms of the officials.
Well, it's the Charles Barkley knucklehead factor. It's like you can't be a knucklehead in these games. You have to keep your composure. You have to realize what's at stake here, and you can't let your emotions get the better of you. And that's exactly what they did. And you don't want to see these things happen getting this close to the playoffs. We're not going to, like I said earlier, we're not going to realize these next 2 weeks, but it's going to be that playoff game when someone pops off, someone gets kicked out of the game, the 15-yard penalty they don't need. Those are the things that are going to send you home early.
Yeah, in terms of C.J. Gardner Johnson, he's always too pushy, shovey after plays, and his mouth got him in trouble this week, and he's got to learn to control that. And guys like Wes Hopkins back in the day with the Eagles, or whoever you want to say, Seth Joyner, they played with that edge. They were aggressive. They hit people hard, but they did not get themselves thrown out of games, which hurt the team. And you know who was on? And we talked about it all along. Nick Sirianni, he really doesn't have that specialty. He's not that offensive guru, or he's not a defensive guy like Dan Quinn. So he's in charge of the overall product, and he's got to talk to his locker room and tell them, look, you can't have penalties because the Eagles had 10 penalties to Washington's only 6. Now, the refs they didn't do the best job. You know how I feel about the referees. They're always messing around in these games, but a lot of flags, and Sirianni's got to clean this up with his team.
Well, exactly. It's the Mike Tomlin effect. Mike Tomlin doesn't coach the offense. He's not the coordinator for the offense or the defense, but what he does is manage that team well, and he has that team listening to him, playing with him. Nick Sirianni's yet to show that. The guys like him, don't get me wrong. It seems like the players like him, but he's not making the difference in changing things with that team in that locker room, it seems.
Yeah, so it's a big week for the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's Dallas week. That when you and I were coming up, that was a big week. Buddy Ryan always gave it a nickname or something, the Pork Chop Bowl or something, but it's just like, all right, they got to take care of business. I am hearing that Jalen Hurts is in the first stages of concussion protocol. Basically, what they're going to do is look at his baseline and then compare it to that, and see the difficulty. Now, I didn't think it was one of the higher grade ones where he was throwing up anywhere or anything like that. So they'll probably monitor him all week, but he has to go through all the stages because we know how the NFL, in terms of CTE and keeping an eye on all this, is legislating against these concussions. So we're here on Lloyd Vance Inside of Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're focusing on this Eagles loss to the Commanders to start the show. Something else I wanted to get your take on. Saquon Barkley, 29 rushes for 150. He did have 2 TDs, including a very long one. He's back in range of Eric Dickerson's record. And I know that's kind of secondary, but how important is that? And I'm thinking, the way the playoffs are shaking out, the rankings are right now, the Eagles probably are going to be locked into that number 2 spot, and they should probably start thinking about beating Dallas and resting against the Giants. So how important is that record? I know the offensive line talked about they wanted it.
I don't think it's as important now as it was, say, a week ago, because you got that loss. You can't get the 1 seed now, pretty much. And you saw Jalen get banged up. You saw other guys, little nicks and bruises here and there. You have to think about you're not getting that bye. You're going to have to play the next week. So what you're going to do is you want to get this guy some rest. You want him to be able to heal up a little bit. And if that requires just playing the first half of that Giants game, that's what he's going to play. I don't sit there and try to, if he needs like 180, 190 yards in that last game, I'm not putting him out there for it.
Definitely. And the thing is, the Giants are just so bad. And if the Eagles can get, you know, in season bye week, where they're playing a lesser opponent. They can play, uh, basically the fourth exhibition game that we always see, where it's, all the backups are in. They should try to do that, because you did talk about injuries, and they had Darius Slay coming in and out of the lineup. He was banged up all week for them, and they need guys like him out there, because you know their defense did not have that great of a game. But like I was telling another one of my big Eagles followers earlier today, look, they're 12-3. We knew a loss was coming. Um, they're not the same team as last year, but maybe they're not the 2022 team that was dominant, and they were just ripping everybody apart on the way to the playoffs. So it's going to be a tough, dogfight out there between Detroit, Minnesota, and then you have the Eagles there in the NFC. So we're here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football talking about Week 16, and the crazy thing was, Kevin, I always get your take on this. The NFL, they had games Thursday, they had games Saturday, they had Sunday, and we have one coming up Monday night. Do you like this? And then they're turning around this week and they're having midweek games on Christmas.
It's a cash grab. I mean, it obviously it is. The thing is, the NBA used to own Christmas Day. That was their coming out party for the season to get everyone into it who's been watching nothing but football all fall into winter. Now the NFL's like, you know what? We want a piece of that pie too. And to me, it's not the football games on Christmas Day. It's the halftime Beyonce concert, because Lamar Jackson even said he's watching that. So that's what I'm going to make sure I get to see.
Yeah, and they're making a spectacle, and as we saw, with the NFL having games on Saturday, they went head to head with college football's playoff games, particularly Penn State, SMU, and then um, the Tennessee game, and you know you saw the numbers. The NFL is king. They beat those games handily, and everyone's still watching National Football. Yeah, it's a great story for that. The college football playoff is now 12 teams, and it's funny because I always thought they were partners, but they're like, the NFL, they want the most they can get, and even in terms of the partners, and we'll talk about these games coming up. The Kansas City Pittsburgh game is on Netflix and on Wednesday, and the Baltimore Houston game is on Netflix as well. So they're getting Netflix all in line with them, and hopefully Netflix's broadcast is better than when they had the Mike Tyson fight.
Yeah, if I have to sit there and watch a spinning wheel the whole time and I've already missed a quarter of the game, I'm going to have some issues. So hopefully they've straightened that out exactly.
Yeah, well, and the NFL, everybody, they got to see every play, and if there's a lag, or there's some kind of difficulties, they are going to Netflix is going to hear it. So hopefully they have cleaned up some things, because we all know gambling is involved. It used to be fantasy football, yeah, but everybody is gambling now. I was just at a holiday dinner with my niece who's 30, and she started talking to me about, oh, what game should I pick? I'm like, wow. I'm like, here we are. Everybody's putting some shekels on this thing. They all got their apps, and it's crazy. But in terms of uh, the home teams, were 12-3 this week, so far, and it's like, wow, it's really starting to mean something. These home field advantages start to get cold outside, maybe get a little weather. There were 10 covers, and there was only one win non-cover. That was Buffalo. That was a pretty close game, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But then you had two outright winners that were underdogs: Washington over Philadelphia, and the crazy one was Carolina over Arizona. I don't know what happened there. We talked about that. And then in terms of the over under, scoring is way up there: 11 overs and only 4 under. So, scoring's up around the league. They love it. The ratings are up, and we're getting that push that we always talk about going into the playoffs. So, exciting times around the National Football League. We'll start jumping into these other games outside of the Eagles. All right, Thursday night. I watched this one. Um, the Chargers 9-6 to get a home win over Denver, who now drops 9-6. To they kind of solidified their spots in the playoffs. So they went 34-27. What I really took from this game was Herbert, man. He had a nice comeback. The Chargers scored 15 points in the fourth quarter, and they closed this game out, and they had so many problems with that in the past with Brandon Staley. Harbaugh has brought some toughness to this squad.
And that's what they're expecting with Harbaugh coming in there. Someone to straighten out the organization, the franchise. And I think he's overachieved this year, to be honest, with what he's had to, work with and everything. The one thing I'll take away from that game is I got to see a free kick. You don't see a
Oh
free kick for
yes,
40, 50 yards. It was like, that was one of the dumbest penalties I saw. And sure enough, the Chargers took advantage of it, and that's what set the tone for the rest of the game.
yeah, and it was interesting because Nate had the Chargers kicker Dicker, and we were like, "Oh man, watch this!" And I said, "Well, there's not going to be any rush. He just gets to kick it." And then we're like, "Wow." I didn't see that back at 76, and that's how long it's been since that happened. And it reminds me of the longest yard where they were like, "What was that? Drop kick." 3 points, and they're like, "What? I've never seen that." So it was that type of situation. Harbaugh he's right on the game. He has a lot of gamesmanship. He jumped right on that situation. He knew. Okay, I call a timeout or whatever, and they got the penalty, and then he was able to get that free kick with no time on the clock. So it was a good win for them. Yeah, it was just crazy how that played out. They're a physical team, and the Chargers. Like you were kind of saying, they're ahead of schedule this season. We knew they were kind of be better. It's good that Herbert's finally winning these games, and he actually got out of the game healthy because he's had an ankle injury. He went over that. Defensively, I think they're really starting to get after some people. Bosa had a sack in this one. Bud Dupree. They have Khalil Mack back there, and they're attacking defense that has a lot of speed. So good win for them. The Chargers will be at New England that Saturday. Denver will be at Cincinnati. That's all. So Saturday. So, but I think both those squads are going to get in the playoffs. They'll probably be your sixth and seventh seeds in the AFC. Another game we talk about is Kansas City. Well, they didn't have to pull the rabbit out of their hat this week, and it started showing. You say, okay, they're starting to get right. The only guy that didn't get right on our team was Travis Kelsey, of course, just in time for my fantasy football semifinal battle. He only put up 8 points in this game, but I got to look past that. Um, the Chiefs are now 14-1. They beat Houston 9-6, 27-19. And the thing is, Houston, yes, they won a very bad AFC South division, but they just don't look right. And I think they're going to be ready for another wild card early exit, and you're going to start questioning, okay, you know, where's this team go from here? And then Patrick Mahomes, he had a very bad ankle injury, but he was able to run and move around in this one, and it looked good, pretty good in this victory.
The one thing I took from this game is I don't know if the Houston Texans wide receivers play on, practice on top of an old Indian burial ground or what, but their wide receivers can't stay healthy.
Oh
Poor
yeah,
Tank Dell on that touchdown that he caught. That was brutal. And you could tell by the looks on the players' faces, they knew the severity of it as well. Also lost Diggs for the season. Nico Collins has been out here and there periods of time. And I saw they picked up Deontay Johnson today just for the fact they need to try to add a wide receiver to get something out of. And I don't know what they've done with the Joe Mixon plan as well. Joe Mixon was eating up yards left and right. In the last month, it seems like they've kind of tapered away from him, which doesn't make sense to me also.
yeah, some great points there, and Joe Mixon. Yeah, I was waiting for him to break out. He just could not get going. He's bottle up, whether it was Chris Jones or Kalafdaitis and Bolton. Those guys are flying around the football for KC, and the Chiefs are solidifying themselves as that number one seed. They're going to get that bye, and then you start saying, okay, yeah, they won a lot of games in close fashion. But you have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid entering the playoffs, and they're going to be a dangerous team. Um, I found it interesting offensively. You started seeing Kareem Hunt take over the running. 11 rushes, 55 yards in the TD, and they had him in there at key moments in this game because Pacheco got stuffed on a key fourth down run, and they kind of went away from him. So, Kansas City held the ball for 33 minutes in this one, ran 70 plays to only 58 for Houston. So they're starting to show you they're a physical team, and defensively, Spagnuolo's group is really starting to get after these quarterbacks.
Yeah, you could tell the calendar has switched from November to December, and we're about to jump from December to January because that Kansas City team now, who once again you see teams that can flip a switch. It's like, all right, let's just collect wins. Let's just collect wins. And now it's like, all right, now it's time to go to work. Now let's fine tune everything we need to make this run again. And they know how to do it as well. They have the coaches there, they have the players there. And this is what we talked about. Now it comes up the three-peat because they get if they can work to get a bye. If not, you still have to go Kansas City. I mean, they're a tough out, and until I see it, I won't believe it.
Yeah, and it's definitely, until they put the stake in their heart, I'd have to say
Mhm.
they're the favorite. All along, I said, okay, it'd be Kansas City and Detroit. We'll see if this comes to fruition. And then when you talk about the uh, AFC, I'm looking at the playoff picture right now. The Chiefs are one. You have Buffalo, who's two. We'll talk about their game in a minute. Pittsburgh still holding on, I think, under tiebreakers against Baltimore, and we'll talk about their game in a minute. Houston, Baltimore, Chargers, Denver. Do you see any of that really changing in the next couple weeks, or is our playoff field kind of set?
I think it's kind of set. I think Cincinnati's I still has an outside shot there as well. I know they have Denver coming up also, so that could make some noise a little bit. Uh, yeah, it's pretty much. I think it's pretty much going to run as it is right now. And although I will say Pittsburgh has been playing tougher teams lately, and how they're matching up now against these tougher teams is making me rethink how they're playing.
Yeah, and yeah, you're starting wondering. You're like, okay, is Pickens that important to the Steelers' offense, or what is it? Because something's amiss with the Steelers. Are kind of, I think they've lost two in a row, three in a row, and the team just not hitting on all levels. They're not running the ball with any authority, and defensively, they're not getting any stops. So, yeah, I don't see that picture changing much. The road does look like it's going to go through Kansas City. You do have the teams that are like Indianapolis, Miami. You talk about Cincinnati. They have a very remote chance of catching the Denver Broncos. Basically, the Broncos would have to lose out and they'd have to win out, and then we could kind of see from there. But I still think Baltimore may have a shot to catch the Steelers. And it may come down to division wins and all that, tiebreakers. I have to get the math out. I'll leave that to you. You're probably good with the calculator. Um,
I'm sitting here with an abacus in my fingers, but yeah, I'll figure it out.
so that was another big game on Saturday. You had the Ravens, big home win for them. They just dominated the Steelers, 34-17. And in this one, Lamar Jackson complete control. Um, Derrick Henry, he was running downhill in this one. They were feeding him early and often, and then defensively, uh, the Ravens were having their way because the Steelers, as I was saying earlier, they just cannot do anything without Pickens. They're not throwing the ball with any authority. Yeah, there were a couple. I think Austin had a couple nice catches, but other than him, they didn't do much in this one.
Yeah, they got nothing basically out of Mike Williams when they acquired him after the Jets parted ways. Austin's been, he's had, like you said, he's had a couple nice catches and everything, but I mean, Pickens means more to that team than maybe we thought. I mean, he's their one wide receiver they can count on, attitude and all, but he's still the wide receiver they can count on. The thing that changed that game right there was Russell Wilson's pick six. It's still a
Yes.
ball game at that point. He throws that pick six. That just sucked the air out of that whole Pittsburgh team.
Yeah, and you had the Ravens. They're gaining that confidence now. Everybody, and then we'll get the quarterbacks in this game. Um, Everybody, I was talking to Nate about this, is saying, okay, Lamar's got to get done in playoffs. Is he starting to turn the corner, or are we just going to have to wait to that first round game and see who he is?
Oh, we got to wait till the playoffs. I mean, the guy's a multiple MVP. This is what he does. He thrives in these situations. They got Derrick Henry for a reason, and they're using him right now in those kind of situations. It's like, all right, power through him, instead of the two-headed running backs that they used to have with Dobbins and Edwards. So they're riding Derrick Henry. Lamar is being Lamar out there. But until they win a playoff game, get to a championship game, let alone a Super Bowl, we just don't know yet.
Yeah, and the thing is, the Ravens, it would behoove them to kind of have that home, at least one home game, because going on the road as a wild card. I know there were a couple times in the past where teams were able to do that, and I think of the old Ravens team that was able to do that, win some games on the road, particularly in one in New England. But it's just so tough getting these road victories. So Baltimore closes there at Houston. Then they have Cleveland, who's just a dumpster fire. So maybe they win those two games and then they put the pressure on the Steelers. Steelers have a huge game this week. They have Kansas City, and then they finish with Cincinnati, who we were just talking about. Cincinnati, unfortunately, is red hot, and it's just too much too late for them. So, yeah, these last couple weeks are going to be interesting in the AFC North, and that's what you want to see coming down the stretch. So we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here, Kevin Midgette, running everything down for Week 16 around the league, trying to hit most of the big games in the National Football League, talk about what happened and didn't happen. The next game we'll talk about is the Atlanta Falcons just throttle the New York Giants in this one, 34-7. Now, the thing was okay. The story was Michael Penix Jr. He got his first start, and I thought he was efficient in this one. I don't think he threw a touchdown, but he also didn't. He threw one interception, but that really wasn't his fault. The ball bounced off of London up in the air. How did you think Penix Jr. did, and is Atlanta now going to be able to hold on to this NFC South lead now that the Bucks kind of spit the bit against the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football?
I think Atlanta got exactly what they wanted out of that quarterback move. You got to win, which they needed more than they need air. So they got the win for the playoff spot, still trying to get. But also, you got Penix's first start out of the way. It's like, all right, kid, you've been through it now. You got your first start. So hopefully, any jitters, anything, it's one of those things. It's like a relief to Penix Jr. as well. I'm sure it's like, all right, I got this start done now. Now let me concentrate on what I'm doing. I tell you what, though, the story's flying out of Atlanta talking about Kirk Cousins being cut before March to avoid $10 million bonuses floating around. It's like, that is a huge contract just to admit, you know what, we were wrong here. And Cleveland Browns should maybe take note of this.
Yeah, and he's good. Yeah, and Cousins going to be on the market. He's going to be an interesting name as a bridge quarterback. I know he looked bad at throw a ton of interceptions and a ton of turnovers, and he's just not the guy he used to be. But I still think some teams are going to give him a look as a bridge guy because we know that the draft is not what it needs to be in terms of the quarterbacks, and it's just going to be interesting to see how this turns out for Atlanta. Atlanta down the stretch, they have at Washington, which is a big game, and then they have Carolina. So um, they got to find a way to get a W against Washington. That's going to be a great battle of two young quarterbacks. And we talk about this year's rookie class. These quarterbacks have really started to play well. I watched a lot of Bo Nix on Thursday night, and you saw his maturation. And then we talked about the development of Jaden Daniels, and this group's done well. And unfortunately, the guy who's taking number one, Caleb Williams, he's running for his life. And in terms of the rookie quarterbacks and award, we thought that maybe Brock Bowers being the mix from the Raiders, but I think it's Jaden Daniels' award to lose, and just talk about Jaden Daniels and some of the rookie quarterbacks' performance.
It's always interesting to look back like 4 years later how the rookie class performed and everything else. Jaden Daniels, he's definitely, I believe, the offensive rookie of the year. To beat a quarterback in that award is just like winning the MVP. It's like you have to take it from him. You have to outperform him almost in a way. And Bowers had an incredible season, but it's Jaden Daniels' award. The rest of the quarterbacks, it's a incomplete grade. It's an I if you were taking the class. It's like you don't know. These guys, I will say though, they mostly played injury free. They got to play the whole season. No one got shorted and cheated and knocked out early. So I mean, Caleb Williams. The thing is with Caleb Williams though, he had a little bit of weaponry there. He had a little bit of weapons going on, with Moore and Keenan Allen and Dunze and running backs. So I don't know how much that falls on the incompetence of the Bears coaching staff on that one. I think Washington had the right game plan with Jaden Daniels and how to handle him. So with Penix Jr., it remains to be seen how Atlanta's going to develop him the rest of the season also.
Yeah, and Penix Jr. Everybody thought, we had talked about this way back in the preseason. Oh, Atlanta's got a lot of weapons, but their offensive line's not the best. Defensively, they're still relying on big plays from Bates that they get every once in a while and Judon, but not much else there. The thing is with the Falcons, I want to get this your take on this. Yeah, and you talked about him earlier as a fantasy football roster buster. I mean, what happened to Pitts? I mean, Kyle Pitts, he got 1,000 yards receiving as a rookie, and you talk about, oh, he broke Mike Ditka's rookie record and all that, and he looked like he was going to be the guy, but he just looks terrible for the Falcons. I don't even know if he had a catch in this game.
Oh, he had one. He had one catch. One catch. Uh, that guy's fantasy kryptonite. Don't ever touch him again. Anybody, take it from me. He was playing lights out though in October. He had a 2 touchdown game. He was getting catches left and right. And something went on there. Something where they're just not looking for him, or he's just having problems doing something. But he has. That's the frustrating thing with Kyle Pitts is he has the talent, he has the ability, but it's just not coming through.
Yeah, and I think that offense is really starting to lean on Bijan Robinson. They're smart. Last year was crazy. Arthur Smith, he drafts Bijan Robinson number one, and he leans on Algier week after week, and you're like, what's going on there? He just did not like Bijan Robinson, but Robinson's a dynamic player. I mean, he's going to get to swing passes. He's going to get in space. He's able to run the football as well, and they're building the offense rightfully so around him. London. He's an up and down, inconsistent guy, kind of injuries for them. But, the Falcons are in the driver's seat. And the reason they are is they're 4-1 in division in the NFC South. And they have two victories over the Bucks. And that is huge, looming large in terms of playoff seeding and winning that division. So they're both 8-7. The Bucks, though, they got their work cut out for them. And we'll jump to that game. Your Dallas Cowboys, I mean, they're talking about bringing back Mike McCarthy. Is he's seeming like he's cleaned up everything, and they had nothing to play for, but they were flying around the football, and particularly Bland in the secondary. He was making a lot of plays for the Dallas Cowboys, and they beat the Bucks, surprised them. It was an outright winner by an underdog, 26-24. And then the Eagles are coming here to Philadelphia, and you're starting to wonder, okay, are they going to have enough gas in the tank to give the Eagles a game?
Yeah, I hope they give Mike McCarthy a lifetime contract. I want him to coach as long as he wants there. Sign him up. That's a great call, Jerry. Jerry Jones. Once again, you've nailed it, Jerry. It's gold. It's Dallas. I mean, they're playing with Cooper Rush. They're getting what they can out of him. Tampa Bay, they blew a golden opportunity. That's what it comes down to. They had a chance to sit there and put some distance between them, and Atlanta, not get Atlanta creep back up on them. But now Atlanta gets a win, Tampa Bay gets a big loss, and we're back in the mix again.
Yeah, and Baker played pretty well in this game, and but the thing was Dallas, they just kept fighting, and they were getting a lot of pressure on him in terms of their D line was getting after him, and uh, C.D. Lamb was making some plays. He had a hurt shoulder in this one, but he just kept uh, playing, and then Cooper Rush, a guy who I killed him. I said, oh, he's nothing anything, but he's playing pretty well for them, and you know they're not getting any running game, so it's pretty much on him to get the football out of his hand to Ferguson and the other weapons that they have on offense.
There's one thing I took away from this game, Lloyd, and I'm going to put it under betting stupid, and I hate it. I'm sitting there watching the game. I'm bored. There's nothing on, and they have a thing where you can bet on the drive. What's going to happen on this drive when it starts? So I'm like, all right, let's go punt. So all right, Tampa Bay's come down the first quarter. There's about 5 minutes left. They get the ball. It was 4th and 3. Tampa Bay. They're on their own 48-yard line, I believe it is. That's got to be a punt right there. Tampa Bay goes for it on 4th and 3. The first quarter on the road. It makes no sense. Baker Mayfield hits the wide receiver in the hands. He drops it. It should have been a 10, 15-yard pickup. I lose my bet. Tampa Bay turns the ball over. The kicking makes no sense in the NFL anymore. The lack of punting, kicking field goals. It's a fourth down world we live in now.
Yeah, it's crazy, and you're talking about Todd Bowles, who's he's a conservative coach. I'm surprised he went for it there, but in Dallas, they're getting points all the time because their kicker Aubrey is just incredible. I mean, that guy's making 50 yarders with ease. He's not swinging his leg hard. He just has a great foot, and he's lifting that ball, and he's dangerous. So it's going to be fun to see Dallas come into Philadelphia. That game we're kind of preview in a minute, but yeah, that was an opportunity for the Bucks to kind of keep themselves relevant, and now they're working from behind. So the Buccaneers, um, they have Carolina, who's they could be spoiler. You got to watch out for Carolina, and then they have New Orleans. So two very winnable games for Tampa Bay, but they better hope that Atlanta kind of stumbles, particularly. When they play at Washington, maybe that could be the spot for them. But that's going to be interesting down the stretch race in the National Football League, the NFL South. This is Lloyd Vance. We are here on my show, Insider Football, with Kevin Midgette on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. Thanks for joining us this evening. We're talking about Week 16. The Buffalo Bills. They beat the Patriots 24-21. It was a struggle. I mean, they were a 14-point favorite in this one, and they did just enough. Josh did just enough passing and so forth, but they had to recover an onside kick to finally shut the door on the Patriots. So talk to me a little bit about this game.
It's seemed to be the theme of the weekend. It was a lot of divisional games and it's cold weather. So when you put divisional games at the end of the season in cold weather, there's going to be a lot of close games that maybe wouldn't have been the same, say, September, October, the first time these teams met each other. So was I surprised by it? Not at all. The fact is, Buffalo won the game. That's what you should do. They're not all pretty, but you got the W.
Yeah, they got the W.
Now, if
And the
they keep
thing,
playing that way the rest of the year, it's something to keep an eye on.
yeah, and the funny thing was, it was kind of confusing because they looked like the old Patriots in those red jerseys and the white helmets. I was like, I thought Steve Grogan was out there. It was, but it was a solid win for them. They'll move on, and Cook had a real good game for the Bills. He was running downhill, and they seemed to be building the line around him and everything. And the thing is, as you said, at this time of year, you just want to stack W's and keep moving. And Buffalo is kind of getting themselves in place to be that second seed. So they have a game against the Jets coming up, and then they're playing New England again. Maybe that game doesn't matter if they're already locked in that second seed. Maybe you'll see some guys resting, but you know, solid win for them, and Sean McDermott will take it and move on. Speaking of McDermott's old team, Carolina Panthers. This was a shocker. They beat Arizona Cardinals 36-30 in overtime. The Cardinals were kind of in quicksand all day. They lose James Conner to injury. Of course, Kyler was so starting. He's my fantasy quarterback. I'm yelling at the screen, all that. And, I'm telling Nate, you were wrong. You were wrong about Kyler. I mean, what's going on with him? And the thing was, this was a golden opportunity for the Cardinals, but now they're out. And they have no one to, get mad at but themselves. So bad loss for them, but you tip your cap to the Panthers who are fighting to the end.
Carolina, they've been scrappy the last month or so now. I mean, they're not playing the best ball in the NFL, but they've showed a pulse. They've shown they're not a pushover anymore. And Bryce Young's starting to turn it around a little bit. Maybe the benching helped him. I don't know, but it's like he seems to have figured out a little bit more now what it's like to play quarterback in the NFL. It's going to be interesting to see how he comes out next year. See if he can grow on top of how he's finishing.
Yeah, and he's really clicked with Adam Thielen. He's getting him the ball. Thielen, that veteran wide receiver, you wonder how he gets open, but he always does, particularly in the end zone. And then on the other side of it, talk a little bit about the Cardinals. The disappointment for them in terms of a couple weeks back they were in a driver's seat in the NFC West, and now it's looking like the Rams division.
You know my feelings about Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, I'm not shocked by any means. I didn't anticipate them making any noise at all this year. And the thing is, Arizona has to look themselves in the mirror. How do you fix this team with Kyler Murray as your quarterback? You went out and got Marvin Harrison Jr. in the draft, and he's not having a great year by any means. So you have to figure out how you're going to do this. Are you an offensive team? Are you a defensive team? You have to go at least have one side of that ball that's going to help you win ball games.
And Kyler Murray is a great example of how the first overall quarterback may not turn around the overall fortunes of a team. And people, I heard from some fans like, Raiders fans and Carolina fans, why are we winning these games? Well, that's not the great elixir, the first overall quarterback. Look at what happened to the Bears and what their season has turned into. And I wanted to get your take on, should not, Carolina and the Raiders and the Giants just suck, but should these bad teams tank and not try to win, and then we'll start talking about who's available and all that in terms of these quarterbacks coming out in the draft.
The funny thing is, these teams that want to tank and everything else, they're in the position they're in because their front office stinks. They make horrible decisions. So what are we going to do? Let's lose all these games and then try to make these same guys who put us in this position draft again. The problems start up top. It's not the fact the guys you bring in. You have bad scouts, you have bad talent evaluators. You're probably going to draft bad players. So unless somebody changes their front office, like imagine the Giants leaving the same front office that let Saquon walk. Oh yeah, good luck with that one right there. Unless you have a slam dunk in front of you, it's going to probably blow up in your face.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and you can't fire the owner. I always say that, and it falls back to some of these guys are just bad owners, and they just can't get out of their own way. Particularly the Raiders, Al Davis he's a maverick, he's a genius, but his son Mark, he's kind of a bad owner. He keeps kind of just getting these hodgepodge coaches, and I think they're going to get rid of Antonio Pierce after this season. He hired Mike Mayock as a general manager and didn't really have a game plan there with pairing him with McDaniels, and now they bring Telesco in, who was a former Chargers guy. It's just like, you're right. These bad teams just don't have a game plan, and it's just like, it's Groundhog Day over and over again. It's like, okay, yeah, you can get a top quarterback or whomever, but it's just not going to change the fortune of the team in most cases. And wanted to talk to we talked a little bit about the college football playoffs, and started looking at the prospects, and we'll get one of my scouting guys come on in a future show. But in terms of these quarterbacks in college, none of these guys are jumping out, um, at the forefront to me. Whether it's Shador Sanders or uh, down in Miami, their quarterback. Everybody's talking about him, Cam Ward, and the Jalen Milroe for the Alabama. Is there a quarterback or a college player that team should like? All right, this is the definitive number one guy.
I think if there is, it's Sanders. I think if like you want to stick with the blueprint of we have to draft a quarterback, Sanders is going to be the way to go. I think he has the most ability out of that lot. I think after Sanders, there's a huge drop off. And it might be someone, it always happens. Someone, drafts and trades up with everything, trying to get the next quarterback, and then the next quarterback. After Sanders, you might as well just stay at 15. You might as well stay at 22, 27, because you're giving up a lot of capital to sit there and move up to a guy who's a roll of the dice.
Yes, and it's going to be interesting to see which quarterbacks maybe transfer or go back into school. But yeah, there's just not a lot there in terms of the quarterbacks, and there's other positions that you can build around. Particularly one of the edge rushers that I've been watching is Abdul Carter for Penn State. He's really one of those guys that probably be at the top of the board, and it's going to be interesting to see where teams go. But yeah, I'd say no, don't try to tank, but it's a natural tank for some of these teams like the Giants because they just stink. So we're here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football. We're talking about Week 16 here on Sports Radio 102.9 The Game and the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're running through different games. Speaking of number one overall quarterbacks, the Lions take care of business against Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears, 34-17. Now this game was outdoors and it was in cold weather, so they did their job. Particularly, uh, Gibbs did a great job stepping in because Montgomery's hurt in this one. Jared Goff had a nice game. Wanted to get your take as well on, they ran that trick play where Goff almost, he looks like he trips and fumbles the ball, and then Gibbs fell to the ground, and then he pops up and throws the tight end to the tight end for a touchdown.
Detroit, it's going to be one of those seasons, and don't get me wrong, they could get to the Super Bowl, especially if they have the home games. I mean, they can get in a track meet with anybody and put up points and outscore you. It's going to be a big what-if season, though, if that team doesn't get to the Super Bowl for all the injuries they've had. Dan Campbell has a lot to overcome to get that team in that position. And it's almost a shame if you're a Detroit fan. It's like one of those things when people used to say, "Oh, I hate the Eagles" before 2017. It's like, no, you hate the fans. You don't hate the Eagles. They never won anything. It's like saying I hate the Lions. They've never won anything. What do I hate this team for? Would their fans annoy me? That's a possibility, but I would like to see if the Eagles in my world can't make it to the Super Bowl. I wouldn't mind seeing the Lions win a Super Bowl. It's like, come on, man, let that city have theirs.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great story, and you would hope that they get to the finish line. And I know they're hoping on their training staff and the doctors to get back Anzalone possibly from the broken forearm, maybe Hutchinson from his ankle injury, and maybe a few of these other guys. But it is a mash unit. They have probably the most guys on IR in the NFL, particularly defensive guys. And yeah, you would like to see them continue this great story, but if they're so injured and their roster is depleted, you would hate to see one of those old Super Bowls like we used to be stuck with back in the day where it's just a blowout. So, we'll see how Detroit does. They're out there battling, as you said. They have the pesky. They go to the Niners this week. The Niners are now 6-9, and then they finish with the game. I know this game's going to be flex because it's probably going to be for the NFC North Division in Week 18. They host Minnesota, so that's going to be a fun one to look at. But yeah, the Lions took care of business, and they're trying to solidify that number one overall spot. Did you see the Lions celebrating when the Eagles lost in their locker room?
Oh, you don't think they were keeping an eye on that by any means? All right, if you're Detroit, it's like, let's stay in this dome or let's go freeze out in Philadelphia with their fans. Nah, we want to stay in the dome. Yeah, they're celebrating that.
Yeah, they are, it was interesting. I remember one time I was in the locker room and they were watching basketball game, playoff basketball. It was during a mini camp, and just watching the trash talk between the different guys, and I know that they were excited to see the Eagles lose that game, and there's always connections. Guys know each other around the league, and we'll see how that plays out. And Detroit, yeah, they keep marching on, and Dan Campbell, he's got to be a coach of the year candidate. People have to definitely tip their cap to him. The Los Angeles Rams, they're now at 9-6. They won four straight games. They beat the hapless New York Jets 19-9. Now, this is one of those freezer bowl games that you were talking about. It was in the Meadowlands. It was cold, and they got away with, throwing the football. They didn't throw it much. The Rams did in this one. Goff kind of handed the ball off to Kyron Williams. Williams was definitely running downhill in this game. What did you see from the Rams, and do you think they hold the NFC West lead?
Oh, most definitely, I think they do. I think the Rams now 4 in a row. They have to start getting that feeling. They believe in themselves right now. They believe we have a quarterback that's won a Super Bowl. We can do this. So that's a team now that you have to keep an eye on. That's one that could be a problem, especially if it gets into a shootout offensive type game, because they have some weapons they can do that.
And the Rams finished with two divisional home games. They have Arizona, who we talked about earlier, kind of leaking oil, and then they have Seattle, which may or may not, be big in the divisional standings. But yeah, they'll be home in the Comfort Dome. And you're talking about, the comfortability of Matthew Stafford. He does look good behind that offensive line, and he's getting the ball out of his hands very quickly, particularly Puka Nakua, getting him the ball, Tutu Atwell, and they're a dangerous team, and their defense is kind of coming around too. It's going to be interesting to see with them if they come out of the dome and if they are able to, go into I don't know, one of these other places like a Philadelphia or somewhere where it's cold outside and they can do some damage. So good win for the Rams there. We'll keep going down on a couple of these games, and then we'll start previewing Week 17 around the NFL. The Minnesota Vikings. This was an interesting one. We've been questioning Sam Darnold all season, but you know what? He has really stepped up, particularly that last touchdown where he stepped up in the pocket and he threw a dime to Justin Jefferson, who's playing it out of his mind as well. Big win for the Minnesota Vikings over the reeling Seattle Seahawks, 27-24. And are the Vikings for real? Should we start thinking of them in the same ilk as the Detroit Lions and the Eagles?
Lloyd, it's like I've always said, USC quarterbacks know how to win. They're great NFL starters, and Sam Darnold makes me eat my words every single week. The way he's playing right now, he's playing so competent and making the right decisions. He's not turning the ball over, and I think myself and everyone included, we need to start putting maybe a little more respect on their name when we talk about them, because everyone talks about Philadelphia and Detroit and Green Bay's an outside shot and the Rams, and it's like Minnesota just gets skipped over, and I think it's due in part to that Case Keenum year. Oh, they did it with Case Keenum. They're just doing that again, paper, champion and this and that. But they're playing some solid football here, and they're going to be a problem also.
Yeah, and yeah, Brian Flores doing a great job with their defense, particularly Stephon Gilmore and Byron Murphy are getting turnovers, and particularly Murphy, he's taking them to the house, and then you have Harrison Smith back there. So that defense is flying around, they're making plays, and yeah, Minnesota's going on the radar. It's crazy because they may be the number 5 seed, and they're a 14-2 team, and people got to take notice of them. So Minnesota has Green Bay, and then they're at Detroit in that big game to end the season. So, yeah, kudos to them, and Sam Darnold definitely. Just give him the Comeback Player of the Year award, and Kevin will probably show up to give it to him, as an apology.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that one. Take one for the team there.
Yeah, he's had a great season, and we'll see if the Vikings are able to keep it going into the playoffs. We're here in Lloyd Vance Inside Football, running down the rest of Week 16 before we jump over to Week 17. Um, Last game will probably the Miami Dolphins. They have a slim chance of getting into playoffs, but they kept that alive a little bit. They beat the San Francisco Niners 29-17. Niners are now out of playoff contention. What happened to the Niners in this season? What went awry, and can they turn that around? And then talk about Miami a little bit. Do they have a chance?
First with San Francisco, there seemed to be some inner strife with that team before the season even started. Everyone's worried about I didn't get my money, and some guy got his money. Where's my money? And I think it carried over to the field. I think there's going to be some definite drastic changes with that team next year. The coach isn't going anywhere, so they're going to have to retool that lineup as it is. The Miami Dolphins, basically, outside shot, yes, their season imploded when they lost that Jets game. That was the one right there. That's the one that cost them. That's the one that could have changed their season right there. And the fact is, they're trying to play catch up at this point. I think San Francisco is going to roll over the rest of the season, and I think Miami's just going to come up short.
Yeah, an interesting thing for Miami, they play very well at home, and two of them. He's from Hawaii. He does not like the cold, so their last 2 games are at Cleveland and at the Jets. So
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
all those weapons may be stuck in him. I'll tell you who played real well for them, and I faced him in the playoffs. A Chain was ridiculous. I mean, he was catching the ball, he was running the ball. I mean, he had a huge run at the end of the game for a TD, so you got to tip your cap to him. What a great game for him. And speaking of, accomplishments of the week, we got to jump to our favorite section, as many of our emailers talk about, game balls and lackey. So we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I'll let Kevin go first with his game ball winner for Week 16.
Game ball winner for me for the second time within a month now. Sam Darnold with the Minnesota Vikings, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's keeping the train on the tracks, and I think the Minnesota Vikings are enjoying the fact that everyone else is talking about Detroit and Philadelphia and the other teams, because that's a chip on their shoulder that they're taking out on the field. And Sam Darnold's leading the way with everyone discarding him for his past few years in the NFL. So Sam Darnold gets it from me.
All right, and there's a lot of good choices this week. That's a good one. Particularly the running backs, got to give them some shout outs before I get my winner. Jonathan Taylor was incredible. He had over 200 yards rushing. Chuba Hubbard was, he ran it well for Carolina, and Derrick Henry for Baltimore. But my winner, I talked about him earlier. I mean, Jaden Daniels just came of age against the Philadelphia Eagles. Incredible win. 24-39, 258, 5 TDs. He did have a couple interceptions, but he was able to run the football with authority, 9 rushes for 81 yards. Big win for Washington where they clinched the playoffs over the Eagles 36-33. So he is my game ball winner, and I think he'll soon win the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Lackey, a lot of choices too. I'll go first on this one, but I had to give it. This quarterback was abysmal. I mean, he probably should be playing in UFL next season. Drew Lock 22 of 39 for 210, zero touchdowns. He had two interceptions, both pick sixes in the Giants' 34-7 road loss to Atlanta Falcons. Drew Lock, you are my lackey of the week.
It's a very good choice. Very good choice. My lackey of the week is going to coincide a little bit with your game ball of the week. The Philadelphia Eagles defense caving in against the Washington Commanders. You had a chance to win the division right there, and if you win that game, you have a chance also for the number one seed to play at home to get a bye, and you came up small. You came up small against a rookie quarterback that you've seen before. You sat there, you imploded with your attitude, with the way you reacted to the refs, just in your play in general, that seemed not to know where you should be at the time. That's inexcusable this time of the year, so that's why the Eagles are my lackey of the week on defense.
Yeah, and Kevin, all along I said, okay, they're the number one overall defense, and they're comparing them to, the 2000 Ravens and the 85 Bears. I was like, all right, pump the brakes a little bit. It's been a nice turnaround season for this unit. Yes, they were ranked about 31 overall last year, and this year they've done a nice job in terms of holding opponents down. But yeah, they just had a lot of difficulty in this game, particularly getting Washington off the field. The Commanders were 7 of 13 on third downs. And, the Eagles had the benefit. Their defense did a good job in terms of getting turnovers, but they just were not converting them. So just an overall team failure. And I was looking at maybe C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I didn't give it to him, but him getting thrown out that game, that was huge. So a lot of things to clean up for the Eagles. And yeah, I definitely agree that was a good lackey pick by yourself there. And we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Coast Sports Network coming down the stretch. Those were our game balls and lackey of the week. We're going to move on to week 17, Kevin and I. And as I was saying earlier, this is a crazy slate. Once in the NFL, they want the revenue dollars from all over the place. So it starts Wednesday, Christmas Day. You can't even have that day anymore to not watch football. I love it. Of course, I'm thinking of my wife saying, turn that off. We let's celebrate the holiday, but I know we'll have it on here in my house. Um, Kansas City Chiefs are 14-1. They're at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Uh, the Chiefs are just finding a way to win, and they're showing that championship pedigree. They got Hollywood Brown back. The one area that we do have to look at in terms of the Chiefs is their offensive line, and that's going to be a tough matchup against T.J. Watt and Highsmith and the rest of that defense there. But I think Kansas City's going to find a way to win this one because this group is hitting on all cylinders, and it's Steelers. Something is amiss for them. I'm not sure if they're going to get their receiver back, Pickens, who's kind of been the linchpin for this team.
Yeah, Pittsburgh needs a dub bad. They really do. And I just don't think it's coming this week. I think, especially if Pickens doesn't play, I think Kansas City is just, like I said earlier, they're flipping that switch right now. They're getting everything ready for the playoff run, and they're going to be a little more sharp than maybe they had been a month ago. So I lean on Kansas City this week also.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if the Chiefs are a road favorite in this one. The game is in Pittsburgh, and we'll see how that affects Kansas City's pretty cold this time of year anyway. And Patrick Mahomes seemed to have moved on from that ankle injury, so it's going to be a fun game to watch. But yeah, definitely both of us going with the Chiefs. The second game on Wednesday is 4:30, also on Netflix. Hopefully their stream is running well. It's the Baltimore Ravens 10-5 at the Houston Texans. And the Houston Texans, another team like the Steelers, kind of limping into the playoffs. Yes, they've won the AFC South, but C.J. Stroud is not as efficient as last year. We talked about that bad injury for Tank Dell with the ACL and the kneecap injury. Hopefully he comes back from that. But the Texans just, they're allowing a lot of yards. And Derrick Henry has always played very well for him. Think about all those games with the Titans against the Texans where he ran up and down the field. So I think Baltimore is going to win this one, and they need this and especially if the Steelers stumble in a 1:00 game, they're going to know that they need to get the win. So I think the Ravens win this one on the road over Houston.
Yes, Beyonce Bowl will be the second game of Christmas Day. Um, I lean on Baltimore as well in this one. I just think Houston has too many deficiencies at wide receiver right now. I mean, you're putting Robert Woods out there, Mechie the third, and it's like Nico Collins. Who are you going to double up out there? Schultz actually might show up with a little bit of a better game, but unless they can get Joe Mixon going, I see Baltimore winning this game.
Yeah, and Baltimore's starting to get right defensively. Oway and the rest of the guys on their defense are definitely starting to fly around to the football. Kyle Hamilton starting to make some plays as well. So yeah, I think the Ravens do win this one, and they're just a physical team. But the thing is, we got to see it in the playoffs where Lamar and the whole group, can they get it done there? But maybe Derrick Henry brings a new attitude to that team. So definitely both of us go with the Ravens in this one. And then we have Thursday. There's a game there too. This one will be on Prime for everybody. And Seattle is at the Chicago Bears, and this is a last gasp for the Seahawks. They got to win this one. It's going to be cold there, and we'll see how Geno Smith performs. But their guys, Jackson Smith and Jigma, he had a huge game this week, and I think he's going to do well against the Bears secondary that's kind of struggled, and the Bears offensive line's not blocking anybody. So I think Williams and the rest of the guys for Seattle will get after him. I think the Seahawks will win this one.
This is the game that you hope that you can't meet with your family on Christmas Day, but they want to get together on the 26th. It's like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's all get together on the 26th. It's Seattle and Chicago. Nobody wants to watch that. That game's the reason why they invented gambling and fantasy football right there. That's the reason to watch it. Uh, I would go Seattle on this one. I think Caleb Williams might have one decent game left in him this year. I don't know if it's that one this week, but Seattle, I think they have enough to pull that one out.
Yeah, I think they do. And Kenneth Walker's banged up again. He hurt his ankle late in their loss, and it may be another Zach Charbonnet game. But Smith would be smart to get the ball to Jackson Smith and Jigman. He's just having a great season. DK Metcalf's kind of taking a back seat for them. Seattle and their defense is kind of attacking, so I think they win this one, as you were saying. And then they get a day off, and then Saturday they're back at it in the NFL. The Broncos, we talked about them. Bo Nix he got outdueled by Justin Herbert this week, and it's a tough assignment. The Broncos are going to Cincinnati. Cincinnati playing very well, but too much too late. And Burrow's the chase is just incredible at this time of the season, and Chase Brown, the running back's playing too well too. So I think this will be a good, fun game to watch. But I'm definitely going to go with the home team. I'll go with the Bengals here.
This is a game I can see the over playing out, depending on the weather and how it shakes out in Cincinnati. I can see both these quarterbacks going up and down the field. I think Cincinnati, it's going to be one of the things they peak just a little too late. It's like they're starting to get some things together now, but it's maybe like a couple weeks too late to save the season. But I definitely like the Bengals getting that game.
Yeah, and unfortunately for them, too late. And if they had just won a couple of those early games, they could be in the mix. And that was the one division where I was like, okay, I thought Cincinnati would win it, but I definitely was wrong there. But they're a good team, aggressive team. You don't want to play them this time of year. It's going to be interesting. Can Surtain and that defense for the Broncos hold them back? Uh, the Cardinals, they're at the Rams. I just see the Rams continuing their ascension, getting another victory. Puka Nacua probably a big game in this one. Matthew Stafford. The Cardinals, they're a little banged up. I don't know if James Conner is going to play in this one. What do you see about this one?
I think the Rams throttle them. I think the Cardinals are done and they're ready to end the season.
Yeah, and then you're starting to see a lot of guys, business decisions. They be saying, "Oh, I hurt my finger, put me on IR and I'll collect my paycheck." And
Yep.
a lot of these teams, they have these double-digit losses, and it's just like, all right, I'm done. Which you got to I know everybody's like, don't tip your cap to them, but like the Dallas Cowboys playing hard, Carolina playing hard this time of year and getting wins. That's surprising because a lot of these guys are like doing a Joel Embiid effect. They're like tapping out. They don't want to play in the game. So yeah, kudos to them. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on Sports Radio 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. We're finishing up by talking about Week 17 games here with Kevin Midgette. New York Jets will be at the Buffalo Bills. I think the Bills will take care of business in this one. Josh Allen still playing at MVP level. Kind of had a hiccup this week against the Patriots where he didn't put up big numbers. I think that he's going to take advantage of this against a downtrodden Jets team. And What do you think about this game? And will Aaron Rodgers be a Jet next season? We'll throw that in there.
I think the Bills find a way to pull this one out and go into the Aaron Rodgers situation. He still wants to play next year from all the information that's coming out. Do I think it's going to be with the Jets? Absolutely not. They're even bigger morons than I thought if they bring him back again. They're playing too much Madden, and you might check what year Madden are playing if they're using Aaron Rodgers. So I think he comes back and plays next year, but I don't think it's with the Jets. I think he's still trying to audition for a team, so he might actually show up.
Yeah, and it's crazy you say that because, fans out there complain about their owner. Your owner could be Woody Johnson. He's letting his sons, pick players by looking at the NFL ratings, and he just is. That team is a total dumpster fire, and it's going to be interesting. As you said, Aaron Rodgers still has 1 year left on his contract. Do they bring him back? Do they tear everything down? They already got rid of Salah and Douglas, the GM and the coach there. So maybe, yeah, they need to start anew, and they're a mess. I think that the Bills take care of business. They may embarrass them in that game. Uh, Green Bay Packers at the Minnesota Vikings. Now, we were just throwing a lot of flowers to the Minnesota Vikings and Darnold. They're playing well. But, the Packers, I don't know how they're doing right now with the game being on, but I think they're ascending at the right time. They're starting to hit on the right notes. Jordan Love protecting the football. Jacobs is running with effectiveness, and then defensively they're getting after people. So I'm going to go with the Packers on the road in this one over Minnesota. It may be a close game. Brandon McManus is playing well, kicking the ball for the Packers. So I think they get a close win over the Vikings.
If everything holds as it should be, because once again, I don't know the score of the Saints Packers game right now as well. I think the Packers definitely on paper should win. The biggest question of that game, would they cover the 14.5 points, which I did not touch. I'm just throwing it out there. But if serve holds true and they play Minnesota next week, for all the good things we said about the Vikings, this is the game the Packers take from them. This is what gives Detroit the division and the 1 seed probably. So I definitely go with the Packers.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one to watch. We'll see which running back steps up. Aaron Jones playing his old team. Last game we'll talk about. This is the old Buddy Ryan, Jimmy Johnson Bowl. When I was a kid, Tony Bruno and all the guys, it was Dallas week. They would start yelling Dallas sucks from the get go. But Dallas is coming to Philadelphia, and the game just does not have the juice that it used to back in the day. And we'll see. Cooper Rush and CeeDee Lamb are playing very well, and the big thing obviously is Jalen Hurts going to play through that concussion. I say he does, and I think the Eagles get back on track. Dallas had their Super Bowl basically last week, winning. Winning over Tampa Bay. I think the Eagles take care of business.
Yeah, I think the Eagles handle everything this week. A loss sometimes isn't a bad thing. It's just what they've lost in that loss, the ability for the 1 seed having to go play in a dome instead of playing outside eventually. That was the greater cost of that. Hopefully they learned something from it. I mean, like we talked about, they had 5 takeaways. The defense did some good things out there, but there's things they needed to figure out and learn during the regular season before the playoffs start. They take care of business against Dallas, and they easily run out the schedule with the Giants. So Eagles by 15 at least.
Oh, okay. He's throwing a number out there, and maybe Saquon has a big game and he gets closer to Eric Dickerson record. So we'll see. But yeah,
No.
but another great week here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. Thanks to Angel for doing a great job behind the glass. And Kevin, we will talk to you next week.